In this video, we will generally talk about how you should take notes based on scientific research. And we will talk about some misconceptions about taking notes so that you can learn tips for more effective note-taking and get higher results on your exams. But first thing first, why we take notes? In general, there are two main functions of note-taking. The first function is that when we take notes, we might process and encode information in our memory easier. The reason is that while we take notes, we engage actively with the content of the lecture, which leads to a better comprehension of the presented material. The second function is that you go back to your notes and use them to study material, which is called external storage effect in psychology. Whenever we are listening to the instructor and taking notes, we are following several steps. For example, we need to process what we hear, extract key points from the content, make connections, and paraphrase or summarize the key aspects. As you can see, even though note-taking seems something pretty simple, it is cognitively demanding. And to make this process easier, it might be useful to learn some scientific findings. First, to remember a lecture better, take notes by hand. Technology has started to take place in education with easy access. In our classrooms, we can take advantage of smartphones and tablets, online course management systems, and other technological developments. However, it is questioned that whether students should use technology to take notes. In fact, this is not so simple to answer. In one study, the learning performance of students after taking notes by hand or taking notes on laptop is investigated. In the experiment, while watching recorded TED Talks, students are asked to take notes. They were either taking notes by hand or taking notes on a laptop. I should have noted that computers are disconnected from the internet, so students didn't check out Instagram or so. So distraction is eliminated. Then participants answered factual and conceptual questions about what they just learned. Results show that taking notes by hand showed greater performance on conceptual questions than taking notes on the computers. One of the reasons is when you took notes using the computer, you are more likely to transcribe the lecture. And it is not as effective as you think, because in a regular lecture, the instructor tells approximately 120 words per minute. And it is very unlikely to write everything that the presenter said. Take notes with your own words. Most of the time, we can type much faster, but our writing speed is limited. So it is easier to type with a computer most of the conversation. However, students are deciding what the most important idea is, what the keywords are, and what is necessary while taking notes by hand. In order to do that, they are forced to write the information into their own words. So, while writing notes by hand, processing of the information increases, and that is good for learning. You may wonder, what if I wrote my notes by computer, but I tried to write the information with my own words? Researchers tested this as well. In an experiment, some of the students who were typing their notes were told not to transcribe what they were hearing. Instead, they put the notes into their own words. Even though these instructions reduced some of the transcribing during note-taking, they still wrote more content than those who were taking notes by hand. But when we look at the performance, even they write more and try to use their own words, the group who took their notes by hand showed the best performance. But can we say that taking notes by hand is always better than taking notes on a computer? It seems like the research on note-taking shows some nuances. For example, in some studies, researchers didn't find the benefits of taking notes by hand on answering factual questions. So far, we talked about the benefits of taking notes by hand, but other studies highlight the benefits of computers for note-taking. For example, it is found in one study that answering factual questions, meaning questions that ask for facts, taking transcription notes by a laptop is better choice compared to taking notes by hand or trying to transcribe by hand. So far, we talked about studies that show the benefits of taking notes by hand and by computer. But why results differ? This is because even though note-taking is very important, we didn't talk about the importance of restudying the notes. It brings us to the fourth tip. Read and study your notes after note-taking. I know this is very classic to say, but I wanted to explain the underlying scientific basis for why I am saying this. In one study, students watched a lecture related to a college course that they were taking. Students either took notes by hand or on a laptop during a lecture. And some students were then given the chance to review their notes before the assessment test. So in here there are 4 conditions: laptop, with and without a review, hand, with or without a review. The assessment test was measuring learning on text content and visual content. And researchers found that the effect of note-taking depends on whether students had a chance to review their notes before the test. Students who took their notes by hand generally performed better compared to students who used the laptop on the assessments when they had the opportunity to review their notes. However, when they didn't review their notes, the 2 methods of taking notes lead to a very similar performance. If you are the presenter, try to organize your speech. Also, as I mentioned in the beginning, note-taking is actually cognitively demanding. So if you will be the presenter, and if you want your audience to achieve a higher benefit, you should try to decrease the cognitive loading. And one of the best ways to do this is structuring your presentation as organized as possible. You may try to provide organizational pointers. For example, you may mention the number of points that will be explained, like saying, I will be presenting 3 main factors to support theory X, so that you might reduce cognitive load in students and make it easier to engage in effective note-taking. So, what does all of these mean, and what can we conclude from these findings? The effectiveness of note-taking on computer versus by hand seems to depend on several factors, such as whether students have opportunities to restudy their notes, and the content of the material being learned, such as whether the information is visual or verbal. Overall, there appear to be more experiments favoring taking notes by hand than using laptop, especially when students need to learn visual information or answer conceptual questions. Also, it is important to remember that in those experiments, students were not able to connect the internet, which apparently eliminates most of the distractions. If you are a person who is so get used to take notes from the computer, at least try to eliminate distractions from email or social media. In one of the articles, it is speculated that if we introduce distractions during listening and note-taking, learning will almost certainly go down for the people who use computers. I know that reducing distractions is very hard in reality, but in order to get benefit from technology, it might be nice to keep in mind. But again, it might be worth to try taking notes by hand still. If you find this video useful, you may like this video and share with others. Also, don't forget to share your ideas and opinions with us. See you in the next video.